Hi, I'm Chris Hertz, and I have the pleasure today of speaking with Tammy Savage, founder and CEO of Groopit. Over the last 25 years, I've been a high-tech CEO, COO, and CRO, so I've seen it all. But I recently had the amazing opportunity to invest in Groopit, and I did that because I found the origin story of Groopit to be both really compelling and frankly fascinating. And today I have the pleasure of exploring Tammy's journey on how she has built this amazing company that is helping transform competitive intelligence. And so, Tammy, thanks for taking the time to speak with me on our Fireside Chat today. Um, you know, you have called Groupit a crowd-solving company, and I wanted to chat with you about where that term came from and where the seed for the idea of Groupit first started.
Yeah, well, I discovered it while I was working at Microsoft. It turns out that there's an entire category of problems that are just really hard for people to solve. And they're the ones that involve and affect a lot of people, people across different geographies, organizations, disciplines, expertise with different agendas. I mean, that really describes competitive intelligence
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Um, a diverse problem, and we
Yeah.
didn't have a good way to solve it at Microsoft. So the company gave me 20 people and a number of years to go study complex problem solving in the real world.
Yeah. So you get this big team, you get a couple of years, you're at Microsoft. Um, how did you go out and diagnose the challenges with this type of problem solving? What were the steps you took?
Yeah, well, the first step that I took was to identify real world problems,
Yeah.
intense problems that we could study so we could see the cracks in the problems that, or the systems. And one problem that I chose was 9/11,
Okay.
specifically the recovery after 9/11. And what I was looking for was to understand why it's so hard, why progress breaks down. Um, we we conducted many interviews, and people had so many different stories across different industries and disciplines and places. And um, one of the things that we learned was that these stories really had themes. People use very different language to tell their
Yeah.
stories, right, and different examples, but after you listen a while you can really hear the themes. And we developed a fundamental understanding of why problem solving feels so slow and hard.
And so let's dive into that. First of all, thanks. Really impactful that you went and studied 9/11. So thank you for that. What were the learnings that came out of that, though? Like, did you identify, sort of a top three of how leaders, can be improved, or what was the learnings you had?
Yeah. Um, the learnings were really consistent, and I would think of competitive intelligence as the problem that leaders are trying to solve in this space is that they're really trying to outsmart the competitors, right,
Yeah.
to impact the bottom line.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we learned are very similar. So I'll give you the good news and the bad news to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
The good
Give me,
news
give me the good news. I like good news first.
yeah, the good news is it's not a people problem. We have great leaders all over the place. I've been constantly inspired by the leadership that exists and the people that are contributing to problem solving.
Yeah.
The problem is, here's the bad news.
Okay.
The bad news is that those leaders don't have the systems in they haven't existed to support them when they're leading an initiative that involves all of these different people. So there's 6 things that we learned, and I'm happy to share 3 of them.
Yeah, give me the top 3.
Okay. The first one is you need real-time data from people. Not long narrative, not long conversations, not long emails, but real-time data from people who are seeing what's happening, firsthand accounts. So
Yeah.
that's number 1. Number 2 is they need real-time visibility into that data, and not just the leader, not just the person that is in control or kind of aggregating the data. We've all done it, right? We aggregate the data, we think about the conclusions, find the patterns, and then we publish out our findings. And that really doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
People are making decisions at all different altitudes in the organization, and you have to empower them with real-time visibility so that they can have a front row seat to how the situation is unfolding and changing.
Well, and I'll tell you, just personally, having had remit over large organizations that had to use things like CRM, Salesforce, getting people to actually enter data often means having them see the value of that data, so they actually want to collect it. So I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, that's right. The third thing is that leaders need is the ability to direct people in real time. So problem solving, outsmarting competitors, it is not an event, it's a process, it's a journey. And as you learn, as you get data and visibility, you have to redirect people. So you can't have this hardened system where people collect the same data in perpetuity. And you really have to have unbelievable flexibility to redirect people so that they're constantly giving you the data that is most important, and they're constantly getting that right level of visibility.
And I've heard you use the analogy before of Waze, the traffic app, as a great sort of real world example of crowd solving, applied obviously in a different context, but there are lots of drivers who are collecting information, servicing that back into a collective area, but then actually all being able to act on that data immediately to reroute themselves if there's a challenge. So it just, you can see the impact and the value just through that analogy. But talk to me a little bit about, so you had all these learnings. Why aren't you applying these at Microsoft? You started Groopit.
The Microsoft question. Well, look, Microsoft does amazing things, and but this is not going to be. It's not one of the core things that they're going to do. At one point, Steve Ballmer actually asked me if I could take this idea and use it to go make Bing successful. And I think that's the point when I realized that if I wanted to bring this to the market, it wasn't going to be at Microsoft. But I will tell you, as a leader there, I wish I had this crowd solving capability. Hindsight is 2020.
So let's talk about that. So you were a general manager, you spent 25 years at Microsoft. Obviously, as a GM, you had incredible remit over, everything. I'm assuming competitive intelligence part of that. Talk to me a little bit about like how would you, what were the challenges you ran into from competitive intelligence at Microsoft? How would you have leveraged Groopit as an executive there?
Yeah. Well, one of the real challenges is that competitive and market intelligence exists all over the organization, right? So every person that's talking to customers or different vendors, and they often don't even know that what they're hearing is valuable. So it gets lost, or it is identified as valuable. It's discussed in a meeting, but it evaporates, right? It's not, or it gets lost in a system like CRM or in a Zendesk, any kind of discipline specific system. It ends up everywhere, and it ends up nowhere. So it's a real challenge. So if I had Groopit, and this is really how it's being used today in competitive intelligence, what's important is defining what competitive intelligence is valuable to the company. Maybe it's pricing intelligence. Maybe you want positioning intelligence. Maybe you want to know something specific about a new competitor. So really defining for people what intelligence is important. I compare it often back to your reference to Waze, the traffic app. In Waze, everybody knows you report traffic accidents with quick taps. With Groopit, everybody should know that competitive pricing information is really important. And when you hear about it, you share it with 3 quick taps. And that's the capability that Groopit really brings, so that everybody sees it in real time.
Yeah, I mean, it really resonates with me. I mean, just most recently with the chief revenue officer of a cybersecurity business, and two things really resonated. Competitive intelligence was incredibly relevant to us. It was a fast-moving, dynamic category. Competitor strengths and weaknesses and pricing were constantly shifting, and our ability to ran into is that information was being surfaced, and so my team included product support and customer success and sales engineering, all using different systems. To your point, Zendesk, Salesforce, Slack. We had a really hard time collecting that competitive intelligence data and getting it back in a structured way where we could start to use that telemetry to drive things. So drive product decisions, drive pricing decisions, frankly, driving how we presented and drove our sales process. And what ended up happening in many cases was our AEs, for example, our account executives might hear one thing from one person that said, "Oh my gosh, we're getting killed on this one thing." And that loud voice sort of would create chaos and panic, where if once we had the data, which might take a couple months to because we didn't have Groupit, then we'd be like, "Oh, well, this is not the issue that it was being presented as." And so it made us inefficient and frankly not great at being dynamic and being able to pivot. So I buy into what you're saying. I mean, if we'd had Groupit, it would have really revolutionized how we could respond to our competitors and how we could have driven our strategy. But let me ask you, so when you talk to someone who's in competitive intelligence, market intelligence, what's the elevator pitch for Groupit? What do you?
The elevator pitch.
Yeah, what's the 30 seconds? Or maybe 60. I don't know how long. Maybe a big building. Maybe it could be longer.
No, I can do it fast. Because it is really simple. We're taking something complex and making it simple. What Groupit does is it helps those leaders get highly valuable quantitative competitive intelligence from frontline employees, the people that are seeing it. That's what it amounts to. Yeah. The way Groupit does it is also important because we give everyone a front row seat to what's happening in the competitive space. And what that does is it empowers everyone at the company to make better, faster decisions informed by that competitive intel. So, that is the elevator speech. It is also what really impacts the bottom line.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed the conversation. I know if they are interested in learning more about how Groupit can impact competitive intelligence, that they can reach out to you and your team. So Absolutely. Thanks again for taking the time to chat with me today, and I've enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chris.